So, yes, Anne-Marie, please tell us a little bit about how you came to live here in this beautiful, simple abode 38 years ago. How did it happen?
It was discerned by a Benedictine father in Belgium who has lived himself for 30 years as a hermit in Canada. So he had much experience, and he discerned that what I thought I had, a hermit vocation, that was probably...
Really? He actually just said to you that he thinks that you have a hermit's
and
vocation.
That's important, that you have someone who helps to discern. You know? And
you were how old? How old were you?
Then I was 30, I think. Yeah.
And you had been in a nunnery?
Yeah. And then it was the question, where was I going to go? But in Belgium, I have had too many families and friends. When you are so young, they would be the whole time coming. And it's so dense populated. And then as a university student, I had been up in Scotland until St. Andrews. So I had some idea of what it looked like. And that attracted me. I wanted the desert, but I can't stand the heat. I'm very good at cold. So I was looking for a cold desert. And then I pointed on the map, Croik, somewhere quite a lot above Scotland. That's where like the spirit wanted me to go. And I took 2 suitcases and I just went. And the thing was, this Benedictine father, you would have thought, he would have said, don't do that, you don't know anyone there or anything. But he said, yes, you go. And he said afterwards, that's really a very big sign of a hermit vocation, to really leave everything and to go, to build, not build, on the providence, yes, that God would provide. You know? And I had this very deep call to go to pray for the people. That was the main thing, to pray for the people. And kind of God said, yes, you go and I will provide everything.
Well, that brings me...
And it worked out like that. Yeah.
Well, that brings me to my first question, based on the reading that I did of your 2 letters. It was to Bishop Conti.
Yeah.
Were both letters to Bishop Conti?
The other one was to another priest.
To another priest. Yeah. So I just wanted to start with this question, based on the sentence that I'll read back to you. When I came to live here as a hermit, it was absolutely not to be with God alone, but only to give my life to the world by letting His love flow through me, unseen, in the solitude and inactiveness of Jesus on the cross. That's a very powerful statement.
And that's the main, you've picked it out well.
That's an amazing sentence.
That's the main.
Now, how would you explain to people? I mean, I understand, I feel I understand where you're coming from, what this means. I think I understand it, and I identify with it, and I admire it as a sentiment and as an intention. But how would you explain to somebody who really isn't religious, who doesn't believe in spiritual things, how would you explain to an ordinary person how it is that by becoming a hermit and staying in this cell on your own for 38 years, how are you benefiting the rest of humanity? How does God's love come through you to the rest of humanity? Is it something you could begin to explain to a disbeliever, or is it just inexplicable?
Well, this is a good question. For so many years I thought, and it was really inexplicable. And now with the corona and the lockdown, things have changed. In the beginning of, as I wrote and you read, I've lived here really hidden, and even people in the villages around, they didn't know I was living here because it's so remote, nor the ones why I was really living here. And then Corona came and the lockdowns. And then in the first bit, people were, they said sometimes in articles, we are living like hermits now. You could read that, And that was, the people were forced to live also in a kind of cells or bubbles, and a lot have experienced solitude in a much more way. And then in the beginning of this lockdown, they were kind of starting to think about me. And in the beginning, they said, "Oh, she went there to help for the peace and the silence." And that's what they were looking for too. Oh, they wanted to get out of these bubbles and to peace and silence. And then a bit later, it was, "Oh, it's for nature, beautiful nature around." And we too, we go now walk in the hills, we work in the garden. And then this last bit of the lockdown, even these two answers were not enough for people, And you find people are really are searching, what's the real source? Worship is there must be something, a source, And yeah.
So this is one way in which God's love comes, that you represent you are a symbol of the finding within yourself of the source of all love.
Yeah.
And you mentioned that never for a moment in 38 years have you been bored in this situation.
That's something else. That's not true.
Oh no, you have been bored?
Bored, tempted and bored.
Oh
too.
really?
Bored. If you would read about hermits, that's their biggest problem.
Really?
That has been the problem for people too.
Monotony.
Monotony, yeah. That's in the monotony, and they call it acedia. Have you come to that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Acedia.
Yeah.
That's the biggest temptation of hermits. And
I've seen that translated as a kind of despair that follows on monotony.
It goes, to despair. And then you have to stick and to stick and to stick. And what the abbas would say, sit down and keep sitting in your cell, and you will. And at the very end, always God breaks through.
But sometimes, how long does the acedia last for?
That can be weeks or
weeks. Really?
Yeah.
So you really know all about.
And then you have also real temptations and even attacks of the devil.
Yeah. So what form does that take? The temptations, the attacks.
Well, temptations are a bit what we all have. To break the monotony, you would want to eat. You would want to stop doing this tapestry work and just to read and sit down. All these things.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the attacks.
Of to go out and meet people. That's to give up your vocation.
And do you perform?
And that's also what the devil, even when Jesus was on the cross, but it was through other people to come down from that cross. Come down.
Yes.
Give up your deepest your deepest vocation, to give yourself there.
Yeah, what they said to him, if you are God, why can't you save yourself?
Yes.
They said that, didn't they?
Yeah.
And do you have anything in the way of the Jesus prayer, Maranatha, anything like that you do repetitively in a meditative way?
No, not. No.
Do you know the Maranatha prayer?
Yes, I've read about it.
And the prayer, the Jesus prayer, the prayer of the heart.
Yeah.
Have you ever been taught this prayer?
I've read it, but because of this this experience I had, I kind of don't need it.
Right.
But I can see very much that it would help people to come to empty themselves. That's it.
So let's go back to the experience. And this is the second question I had. I was very fascinated when you said that after this experience of the Trinity and the Holy Spirit being constituted by the mutual giving, the Father and the Son, and that when you opened up to this reality, or when God opened you up to this permanent reality of the love of the mutual giving of the Trinity, you said that you became much more practical. That's not the thing that we would expect.
No.
That everything you did became much more efficient.
Yes.
Everything and that you were not a very practical person before the experience, and then after the experience, suddenly you could deal with the needs to get water, to get food, to build a fire, the clothing. You reacted in a very natural, spontaneous way to the presence of God, which you describe as follows: His presence was acting in itself without me hindering it. So you suddenly felt that you didn't really have to do anything, that this presence was working through you. I was not free any more than to love. He had taken me so much that I could not but love totally, apparently without being free to go away from him. Now, please explain this.
But that's a very difficult thing about freedom. You know? And I have to explain it. I haven't gone to the bottom of it, and nobody ever has, I think.
No.
Yeah. This is the most difficult question.
But what I think correct me if I'm wrong, but are you saying that the experience of divine love was so all-encompassing that it became inescapable? And so in a certain sense, it enclosed you, preventing you from using your freedom to do anything other than to love. That's what I would call true freedom.
Yes, it is. Yes, but for people to explain, yes, that's it.
It is
and I said it somewhere further, I couldn't sin anymore.
Right.
Yeah. Because then I still know when I sinned again. It was to an elderly.
You mentioned that you sinned against.
This experience of these, I've never had it like that again. You know.
Right. So you were not free to go against the love that had been given to you in such.
It was so, as you said, all encompassing. And that's what will probably be when we all will be in heaven. Then we'll all be like that.
So when years later you encountered Accidia, did you fall back on that experience as a memory that helped you through, or did you start to have despair even about the long-term consequences of that experience? Did you think, oh, that was something that came and it's gone and now I'm in despair, or where is that experience gone? Did you think that?
No, because I still, when I pray here, but I have to do a kind of the movement. I set myself before God and I will see him. This is still like that. But it's not in the sense that it just kind of, I have to do some movement.
You have to initiate the process.
So there I have to give my freedom, and it's not like this inescapable thing, as you said.
So you do have to exercise your will. And that brings me to the question of, my whole being was responding exactly to his will. So in a sense, it was only an outward and apparent effort of your will to initiate the process, but that it's really your whole being responding to the divine will, and that will is love.
I
see. Now,
But, to a bit explain, I would have to go back to my past. I have
please.
had when I was a student, I was in the 68, this period, so got out, and I took drugs also at some moment when I was doing research as a pharmacist in Brussels. I took drugs, and then I went totally off the road, and I decided to suicide myself.
Really?
And I could get to the barbiturates, no problem. And it was suiciding. First, you kind of want it and you will do things, but at the same time, tell people a kind of, there's several steps. But then there came that moment that I really wanted to do it, And so, and I still, the God from my youth and childhood that I had loved then came kind back. But I know very well that I say to God, no, and I was going to take these barbiturates. And I took them in an apartment from my parents, where they didn't come, and enough, because I knew how much.
Goodness.
And then, but painters came.
You
wouldn't believe it. And they found me. And they found me on the ground. And now I will show you something. For barbiturates, when you take barbiturates, then it does something to your body.
Goodness.
But the other one, they found me like that, and it was kind of,
And is that why
I was already weakened,
Is that why you have the bruise?
Well, from that's because I've been 2 days. Nobody knows how many days I have been on the floor.
See.
Yeah, I had these wounds.
And then they took you to the hospital?
To the hospital, I came through. And it was even worse.
They pumped out your stomach?
Yeah. I had vomited. That had also saved my life.
I see.
These two things. They took me to the hospital. And there I woke up, and it was even worse. If you don't want to live, and then they bring you back to life. So I didn't want to eat. They forced me to eat. Didn't want to put my clothes on, to speak, nothing. So I was transferred to a psychiatric hospital. And in those days, it still exists. They didn't know what to do with me. I refused everything. Then they put me in an isolation room. An isolation room, have you heard in the hospital?
Yes.
And they put you on a bed, flat. They tie you on it.
Goodness.
And you see the ceiling, but bubble glass, nothing, You see nothing, you hear nothing.
Goodness. They
will come, but they will not speak to you, but they will just, if you need to go, so some things, And I had a drip in me. And I even could get the drip out because I didn't want to live, The drip out, no, And then something happened, and it's again to do with this freedom. My no changed in a total yes, that must have happened.
Your what changed?
My no changed.
What's your no?
No against God, No against God, no against life, It changed in a yes. And when the nurses came, they see immediately that I was making eye contact again. So, and then they took me immediately out of and I remember still, I was put in the garden immediately, and with other patients, and the peace was enormous. The peace, a bit the same as the peace as described here. And I could see things again, and I could hear things. But I couldn't, it's only afterwards that I said the no changed in a yes.
And how old were you at that time?
I was...
How old were you?
That was 22 or 23, yeah. And then in that hospital, it was a Catholic hospital. Some elderly lady wanted to, in the beginning you can't go out, but an elderly lady wanted to go out, and I went with her, and she wanted to go in a church, and I said, go, we go in it, you know. And there I saw the Stations of the Cross, and I said, well, this one was also, like me, was on a bed, you know, was tied on a bed. And then after the Stations of God, what happened? And I knew it was the resurrection. I thought I had to go back to my faith. So I went to Mass, and I remember in the Mass, the first, what struck me most of all was when I'm not worthy to receive you, you know, what you say just before communion. I went to communion, I've never been to. But then there was a poster there with an advertisement for young people, for kind of coming together and in nature, something. I read it like that. And I went there, and it was a retreat, a vocations retreat. It's unbelievable,
apparent coincidence.
Prophet, yes, it's already got working, the providence. Yeah. And from there, they picked me up, and I still had these wounds. I had kind of... There they picked me up, and from there I went to live in Leuven in Belgium, the university, the city. And I got spiritual direction then from a Jesuit.
I see.
And then from there. Yeah.
Right.
But then it took, as you say, it took years before I was really better. Some 8 years or so. But there too you see this problem of freedom, you know, kind of God works. Yeah.
It's a paradox, isn't it, that we know that we have freedom. God has given us free will, and yet we also know that nothing happens without it being willed by Him. So we have to bring together these two. I mean, Meister Eckhart, I think, calls it and even before him, Dionysius, the coincidentia oppositorum, the bringing together of two total contradictions, apparent contradictions, but you have to bring them together, and it can only be done through the knowledge of the heart. The mind can't do it. No. Anne-Marie, one other question I had for you, and we are now on 23 minutes, so I don't want to tire you out too much. The other question I had was this. Well, no, I have two more questions, if that's all right. You mentioned in the letter that you had an obsession, that you kept on seeing yourself putting a knife into somebody, and that the more you tried to kill this person, the less he would die. And then you write, I have understood the real meaning of what happened on the cross and the resurrection. You cannot kill someone who is giving his life. He is the eternal victor. Love that gives itself totally to the end of physical death. On this, death has no power. In this, the power of death is broken. Jesus says, John chapter 10, verse 38, my life, nobody takes it away from me. I give it. So would you like to comment on that a little bit for us?
Yeah, that was... these are other stories that I would have to explain how I came to these obsessions, but that doesn't matter now. But in these obsessions, it was someone I wanted to kill, but he was loving totally.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, now
And
that didn't come across.
That's I wrote this, and that's the main point.
So he was loving towards you,
yes.
and you just kept trying to kill him.
But that was in the obsessions that I realized you couldn't kill him.
So this was really a vision of Jesus, and that you
well,
were...
it wasn't really Jesus, but it just explained how Jesus too, you cannot kill someone who gives himself.
Who gives himself to you lovingly. And even if you try and kill him, he represented, this person that you were trying to kill was a symbol of the love that Jesus Christ gives everybody. And you're trying... Is it similar... Mel Gibson, he did that film, The Passion. Have you seen it?
No.
No. Have you heard about it?
Yeah.
It was a very powerful film, and I saw it with my wife, and we were very, very moved by it. Mm-hmm. And apparently Mel Gibson only put himself in the film at one point, and that is that his were the hands that were nailing Jesus to the cross. Yeah. He didn't appear in the film with his face, only his hands. Mm-hmm. And he wanted to give a message. He said, this is me acknowledging that I am among this sinful humanity. We are all responsible for hammering the nails into the cross. That's it. It's a powerful statement. Yeah. So in a way, your dream is a bit like that.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
That you're trying to kill this loving person through whom God is trying to save you. Yeah. By means of that love, you try to kill, but that love is more powerful than your effort to destroy. Yeah. So the creativity of love prevails over the destructiveness of death. And as you say beautifully, on this, death has no power. In this, the power of death is broken. Very, very wonderful words. But can you just say again how you understand the crucifixion? Mm-hmm. How do you understand the real essence of the crucifixion of Jesus Christ?
That it was Jesus who gave himself on the cross for the world, to save the world, and that in his total giving of himself, he couldn't be killed, and he kind of rose out of that.
So his death was only an appearance for 3 days.
It's not an appearance. He was. That's a very difficult thing,
Because that's what the Gnostics believed. It was only an appearance.
Yeah, no, he was really dead, but he couldn't stay that, And they say, especially in the Orthodox Church, he went to hell.
Right.
He went to hell. But to hell, that is to go in the deepest regions of sin, to kind of to transform all that into love, into something positive.
This is what they call the harrowing of hell, isn't it?
Yes.
Harrowing of hell.
But he was really that, because otherwise you go on sideways.
The Gnostic, Manichaean heresy. Right. And the Trinity, how do you understand the meaning of the Trinity?
As I said, that for me, the Trinity is a happening.
I see.
A happening. And that's in my prayer here. But, when I sit here, I see between brackets, because I don't see anything, but that's the only way you can say. I see a happening, and what I see happening is that giving of the Father giving himself to the Son, and the Son giving himself back. And that's the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, is the one who is in the middle of this kind of.
I've never.
So, and I see a happening, and that's why I can sit here for an hour, and I can be here. I've never been able to explain that except to you. I've been sitting here. I can sit here 38 years and never be bored, And that was amazed people, because if you would look at the Trinity as a thing, you get bored after 2 minutes, But a happening is something different.
That's wonderful.
That goes on and on eternally, But that only happens if you have to lose yourself from the world, really, and especially from all kind of evil things. And that's a very difficult thing. In a way, then you have to be, again, between brackets, what they call pure. In a lot of religions, they will speak about purity before you can meet or find God. And then there is I cannot I testify there is an evil one also. And what then is called the devil, and he can interfere too. But where this one is kind of originally coming from, the Catholic faith says that it was the first one who was created by God and who immediately say no to God. I don't go with you, and a fallen angel, kind of.
Lucifer.
Lucifer,
and his emerald falls out of his third eye area, and there is some symbolism in Catholic. I've heard this in the explanation of the cathedral architecture, that the Freemasons had put the a gap where there should be an emerald stone in the very middle of the cathedral, underground in the vault, and that this signifies the fallen jewel, the emerald from Lucifer when he fell from grace. And this emerald fell, and they have an empty place for it, and they say that when Jesus harrows hell and redeems everybody, even Lucifer will be redeemed. Do you
That's
believe?
too. The Syriac fathers say that. Syriac fathers are very much into that.
I see. Well, thank you, Anne-Marie. I've really learned something, because I've spent a lot of time looking at different theories of the Trinity. Meister Eckhart, Thomas Aquinas, Bonaventura, St. Francis of Assisi. I looked at them, trying to get an angle to help Muslims understand this doctrine with respect and not dismiss it, because the overwhelming majority of Muslims reject the Trinity, they reject the crucifixion, they reject the incarnation, and they don't read the Quran properly, because the Quran gives you clues to the higher metaphysical meaning of these mysteries. And what you've told me today is something I haven't heard before, which is that the mutual giving of the Father and the Son is what constitutes the Holy Spirit. That the Holy Spirit is this mutual giving between the Father and the Son.
And that the Trinity is a happening.
A happening, that's the key thing. A happening.
And it's an experience of life. I should kind of tell my life where I experienced that.
Please.
I know, but that's a bit too long. We'll do that if you want.
Another time.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I'm very grateful, Anne-Marie. This has been such a great conversation.